So, very good morning. I welcome you all to this session of Facts and Fears of COVID-19 in ophthalmology. It's a matter of great honor that Dr. Swarna Bisaria Gupta ma'am is with us. She is going to chair the session. Now, about her academic excellence, she worked as a dean in Gandhi Medical College, Bhopal. She also worked as director medical education. She worked as director Regional Institute of Ophthalmology, and she has been awarded with Professor Emeritus. There is a lot to say about her academic excellence, and I'm too small to comment on that. But the one part which I admire the most about her is her is always her promptness, always responding to everything, whatever is being asked. So thank you, madam. Now I'll invite the team of our panelists, Dr. Pankaj Chaudhary. He is professor in SS Medical College, Viva. He is postgraduate from Regional Institute of Ophthalmology, Bhopal. He is a recipient of Manish Hiresh Chandra Award in Orbit and Oculoplasty. He also received DNS Chaudhary Award for Best Paper in MPSOS 2012. He did advanced course of medical education from Karamsad and also worked as a secretary and as president in Ophthalmic Society, Viva. His areas of interest are cataract and cornea. Dr. Harpal Singh, he is professor and head of the department, People's Medical College, Bhopal. He is graduate from Jabalpur Medical College and postgraduate from GMC Bhopal. He is being trained in cornea, glaucoma, and medical retina from Chitrakoot Eye Hospital and also worked in Seva Sadan Eye Hospital, Bhopal as an anterior segment surgeon. Dr. Vivek Som, he is professor in Department of Ophthalmology, Gandhi Medical College, Bhopal. He is graduate from MGM Medical College, Indore, and is a postgraduate from GMC Bhopal. He joined as faculty in Bhopal and presently working in Retina Clinic, GMC Bhopal. Apart from this, one thing I would like to share that he is doing excellent photography. Dr. Madhu Chinchalani, she is a graduate and postgraduate from MLN Medical College, Allahabad. She's working as a professor and head of the department, Chirai Medical College, Bhopal. She worked as a treasurer and executive in Bhopal Divisional Ophthalmic Society. She published 10 papers in national and international journals. Her special areas of interest are cataract, glaucoma, and cornea. Dr. Farooq Aman. He is a graduate and postgraduate from GMC Bhopal. He is working as an assistant professor in MIMS, also working as a director Aman Advanced Eye Hospital, and he is a very good anterior segment surgeon. So I invite our chairperson and all the panelists and all the audience for discussion. In last couple of months, our both professional and personal life has been changed. In OT, earlier we were looking for HIV or hepatitis. Now we have to think about COVID. Online teaching has replaced by a traditional classroom teaching. Pattern of communication has changed. Less talking and more of telecommunication. On the other hand, we are getting more time for reading and lots of creative work. And so obviously we can utilize this time for good research. So many changes we acquired now out of compulsion, and I hope that they might prove useful in later period of life. So idea is to turn this crisis into opportunity. Now I invite Dr. Swarna Bisaria Madam Gupta, Dr. Swarna Bisaria Gupta Madam for her keynote address.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Everybody knows this is a very hard time. Since 5 or 6 months, we are facing so many difficulties. But now I am happy because I am with my knowledgeable colleagues on this platform. And we can share about the facts of the COVID. When one knows the facts, then he will not fear. So we will not be in doubt about the stranger of this. It has disrupted our life. Everybody knows not the life of the human being, but the animals also. And you know, in world, it is in the whole world. It is a global crisis. You see about 70 crores of the people are suffering from infected by the COVID, and about 6 lakhs of the death has occurred. In India itself, about 17 lakhs persons have infected and about 4,000 40,000 persons have suffered from this disability and died. So this is a very grave situation. Apart from the death and the infection which occurs due to any disease, the most important thing is the disturbance in the education of the student. About 1.57 billion students have disrupted the education, and it is going back to towards the back foot. Apart from this, the professionals have suffered a lot. Even if it is engineer, they are working from the house, home, housework, and online. So they are not doing the exercises. They are just sitting for 20 hours and putting the problems and developing the metabolic disease, heart diseases, deep vein thrombosis, and so many problems. Regarding the doctors also, see, we have the fear of transmission. Now this transmission is due to the droplets because the first case is noticed on 30 January 20. And after that, it has developed, transmitted so much that so many doctors has died also. And the medium for the transmission is the droplet infection because of the cough, coryza, and sneezing. Physical contact, of course, we are looking after the physical contact, but anyhow, it comes. And then you see the aerosol infection is there and contamination of the equipments. Because we are working close to the nose, our eyes are always open, and then we are seeing that when we are working close to the nose, the infection can go to the patient also and to us also. So these are the transmission modes. This virus is present in the tear film. This is very important for the ophthalmologist. You will see that the virus is there in the tear film and it can infect through the tear film. Then the transmission you have already seen. For the ophthalmologist, conjunctivitis is there, but it is very mild and rare. So what we have seen that in spite of the conjunctivitis, there will not be any problem of the keratitis or anything. Then in the safety measures, when a person is coming to you, I think it is better to do for the screening of the fever at the doorstep only. Check the history of the COVID as we are doing, promoting less physical contact by reducing the volume of the examination and use of the telemedicine. There should be less crowd or no crowd with the patient. One attendant or no attendant should be there. Then examination of the working should be in the isolated designated rooms which are protected. Hospital staff and yourself should wear the protection PPE, mask, gloves and screen, and then the patient should also wear the mask. He should put the covered cloths, and then the regular decontamination of the appliances, furniture, and common areas should be done. These are the safety measures. Now, what we have seen after this safety measure, how this spreads mechanism is when the virus invades the mucosa, it is enveloped by the glycoproteins, and now it binds with the host cells. After this, angiotensin converting enzyme liberates and fuses the virus and host cell membrane, and this releases the mucoproteins in the cytoplasm, and which is responsible for the viral RNA. Now, this virus is released from the cell at this time. But sometimes what happens, this RNA genome, this triggers the antiviral response through the interferon or pro-inflammatory cytokines. Cellular produces the humoral immunity. So this is little bit preventive, but we are not sure how long this immunity will remain. As regards the morbidity, this virus is changing the face every day. To start with, it has come with a fever, coryza, and dyspnea. But after that, it has infiltrated the brain, testicles, cardiovascular system. So you don't know, by changing the state, it can go anywhere. So what we have seen in India, it is very less because he is our guest is 4 months only. So we have seen, and I have read in the literature of the abroad, that is China, they have noted the manifestations in the animals in the form of anti-uveitis, retinitis, vasculitis, and optic neuritis. In India or any having hyperemia, chemosis, but there is not any hemorrhagic manifestation. But in this case, we have seen the WBC count is raised and C-reactive proteins are noted. Conjunctivitis of the adult and the pediatric patients are having the same manifestations. Then one case was noted in the USA, where the bilateral anti-uveitis is seen due to multi-system inflammatory syndrome secondary to COVID. But we have not seen any case of the uveitis in India. This uveitis patients as a vulnerable group for COVID-19 on immunosuppression, because they are already immunosuppressive, and they may produce on the contrary the COVID. So COVID doesn't produce as uveitis, but the uveitis treatment of the uveitis may indulge the patient into the COVID. And one thing more, that is the contact wearing persons. They are having the advantage of the protection, but due to frequent touch of the eye, rubbing of the eyes, they may produce the infection of the COVID. So one should be careful. How we can mitigate it? We can prevent the entry into the host cells by using the convalescent serum or naturally occurring anthraquinone. These are the imodine and promazine. And what this will do, this will disrupt the binding of the protein with ACE2 receptor. Second stage, we can prevent at the fusion by release of protease inhibitors, that is the chemostat. Then we can prevent the replication of the virus and survival in the host. And that is, we will have to use the antiviral drugs. And lastly, and very important, it is the immunity. Now, vaccination is very important for the active immunity, but it is not available. So we don't know when it will come, and if it will come, it will be effective for that strain or not. So Indian traditional products, prophylaxis is very important for mitigation. And the most important thing is the prevention and the physical contact lessening is important. Then just to conclude, we have seen this strategy is very, this stranger is here, and our world is shaking since 6 months. It shook this COVID-19 shook the economy as well as the life of the people around the world. And what is the cause of this? This human infiltration into wildlife space and uncharted territories in the food chain has created dangerous between human and the animals. And this causes disease to jump species. Because when we are eating in the wet markets, we have seen the animals are not the primary thing, but the wet market had the contaminated blood which is coming from the one shelf to the other and producing the viral infection. So this is the hygienic condition should be there. That's why I think the virulence is less in India, because we are not using the wild animals' hairs. So this is a very unfortunate thing to introduce in the wildlife space, and the plants disturb the balance. We are learning about the control measures of the COVID, but as an ophthalmologist, we need to follow the safety measures religiously to protect the patients and ourselves. Now, after knowing these facts, I think there is no need to fear, and we can make this crisis as an opportunity to work. Just wait and watch and see, it is a most unpredictable guest of our life. So we will have to fight with it, and we will see. Now our panelists are going to discuss about the load of the virus for causing the problems, what are the manifestations, how we can overcome, and how this telemedicine will improve or help in the treatment in this dreadful era. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, ma'am, for this relevant information. Now I invite all the panelists for this discussion, and we are going to have a discussion on clinical manifestation, particularly ocular involvement due to COVID, what ocular structures are getting involved. And then obviously we all know that necessity is mother of invention. So we had made certain innovations in our OPDs as well as operation theaters. So we are going to discuss about that also. And nowadays, because mode of communication has been changed a lot. So a bit about telemedicine and telecommunication. So I invite you all. Now, as far as clinical manifestation is concerned, we all know that that conjunctiva has got ACE2 receptors, and these ACE2 receptors are present in uvea and retina also. Now, this virus has got affinity for these receptors, and similarly, as it is found in alveoli of lungs and kidneys also. So, we are expecting ocular manifestations because of special affinity of virus with these ACE2 receptors. So, we are expecting involvement of different ocular structures. Now we all know that one of the Chinese ophthalmologists, Lan Wenliang, he also said to have acquired this COVID because of while he was examining some glaucoma patient, and later on he died also. So ocular mode of transport has always been talked about this, but how common it is that we are going to discuss. So I want to know from all the panelists that what is the role of peers in this whole process. Secondly, do we expect the presence of virus in aqueous or vitreous humor? Next, I would like to know that if conjunctivitis happens, then what will be the clinical presentation of that conjunctivitis, and how we are going to differentiate this conjunctivitis from the seasonal conjunctivitis. Nowadays, we are getting many cases of seasonal conjunctivitis. And apart from this, many of you are working in COVID centers. So I would like to share your experiences also. And then I will definitely like to know the role of RT-PCR, particularly how relevant it is in diagnosis of conjunctivitis and overall disease of COVID. So, Dr. Harpal, will you like to comment about this?
Thank you, madam, for giving me this opportunity. As of now, from various studies and our knowledge, we must know that the conjunctivitis is the one of the important manifestation of the COVID-19 as far as ophthalmology is concerned. Although the prevalence of conjunctivitis is not that much, and the gravity of conjunctivitis is not that much. It's hardly point less than 1% of the patient is suffering from conjunctivitis. First of all, how the conjunctivitis happens? What is the mechanism of conjunctivitis? As of now, the conjunctivitis is the exposed mucous membrane. As the disease is spread through aerosol, and these aerosol may get inoculated into the conjunctival surface. And secondly, the patient of COVID-19, the nasolacrimal duct is also a site of inoculation of virus into the conjunctival site. So these are the things from where we get the virus. So the manifestation of conjunctivitis is not that much common, but because of adverse happened with our ophthalmologists in China, unfortunately they get died while examining the patient of glaucoma. So as of ophthalmologists, we are more concerned about the infectivity through the nosocomial infection, which we may get from these patients. So our concern is the tears. Tears is the site from where the virus has been detected till now. There's 3, 4, 5 studies has been done in China. There they found the RT-PCR positive in patients of COVID-19. Although the patients are less than 1%, the viral load is also very less, but it is a potential site of infection to the ophthalmologist. It's not a very risk of transmission to society is not that much. But as a ophthalmologist, as a eye care person, we are already very close proximity to patient. Like their examination tools, all are we have to very close to the patient. So we are already exposed to the patient as far as respiratory transmission is concerned. So we have to take all precautions. But from ophthalmological point of view, tears is a suspicious thing. Ocular secretion is very suspicious, and we have to be, because we don't know. Daily things are changing. So presence of tears, although the virulence is less, we have to be open all our protective equipments ready while examining the patient. As ophthalmologists, we are not good that much. We are not taking that precaution. We are in hurry. So while the patient comes to you with the signs or symptoms of conjunctivitis, it is our duty. We have to be alarming, and we have to be very careful. We should ready everything. We have to wear gloves. We have to wear mask. We have to apply shield. We have to use a barrier for breath shields and so on. Whatever the precautions as advised to our ophthalmic societies. So these are the major concerns that we should take. And this is the one of the additional site for confirming the diagnosis in case some patients are not positive for the RT-PCR. That we'll discuss later on. And second part of this, whether virus is present in vitreous or aqueous. So as of now, there is no evidence is available to us that a virus is active in aqueous humor or vitreous humor. So our concern is we have to protect from ocular secretion. And then second part is the type of conjunctivitis or how many cases of conjunctivitis we will get. From these studies done in China, the incidence is roughly around 1 to 2%. So the nature of conjunctivitis is so that we have to differentiate it from the normal viral conjunctivitis. So as Madam Bisari has already discussed about this thing, the conjunctivitis is of low grade and self-limiting. Number one. The most common symptoms are the signs are redness, watering, irritation, formality sensation. These are the big symptoms that patients comes to us. But there is no as such corneal involvement or uveal tract involvement in COVID-19 conjunctivitis. With compared to the conjunctivitis caused by the other virus, most commonly the adenovirus, which we commonly see adenovirus, picornavirus, and herpes group of viruses. So the presentation of these type viruses is slightly acute, and it is a very highly contagious. The patient is having profuse watering, redness, pain, and thirdly, the patient may have a visual disturbance because of involvement of keratoconus uveitis also. So, and thirdly, there is a mucous membrane for pseudo membrane formation, and also there is the hemorrhages that is also are more in these other viruses like petechial hemorrhage and subsequent hemorrhages. So with this spectrum of difference, we can differential our diagnosis when we see these patients. But until unless any patient comes to in our OPD with symptom of conjunctivitis, for the sake of our safety, we should consider those patients as a COVID-19 positive, irrespective of their RT-PCR or not. So this is so that we can protect ourselves from all these outcome of this disease. And the third part is what is the role of RT-PCR? As in our country, this is a diagnostic tool is not that much available. Now we are having number of cases of RT-PCR we are doing for the diagnosis of this highly virulent disease. So for doing RT-PCR in case of conjunctivitis, slightly because of it's costly and our government is trying to diagnose more number of cases, asymptomatic cases of COVID-19. But we should keep in mind that for the research purposes and for the better understanding of viral load in tears, we have to do RT-PCR for the quantity and quality assessment of the tears. Until as we know the virus load in conjunctiva, we are not able to justify, or we are not able to conclude, or we are not able to say about how much infectivity is there. So this is for research purposes, and it's also advisable for those patients. In our previous studies, the patient is having COVID-19 asymptomatic, but frank conjunctivitis is there. So for those cases, at least we should do a RT-PCR of conjunctiva because it is easily accessible. Tears are very easily accessible to us. So this is this is helping us to make a diagnosis. So this is the thing that we should go ahead. One thing I want to share you that in Indian scenario there is no studies done so far. As far as in our institute, we are having now a COVID patient, and fortunately we have applied for a central government funded research project on this RT-PCR and congenital manifestation of COVID-19 patient. So we are one step above. First, we have crossed the first stage, and our research already accepted for doing this study, and that include the RT-PCR of the conjunctiva. And we are just waiting for the second round. Then we'll get a funding on all, so that we can do this study, and we can know the what outcome we will get. So it's a positive thing that now we have patient, and we are one thing I want to tell you, the patients are there in our ward. So now we have included the ocular symptom signs in our case sheet. So meanwhile, we see how many patients are manifested as a any kind of conjunctivitis features, and once we get the permission, then we'll start RT-PCR in our patients, as the government allow us and give fund for that. And as far as the last question is concerned, how our this presentation is differ from the global presentation. So this is the limitation, that we don't have any studies in Indian scenario to know the presentation, to know the infectivity, all this based on the Chinese or other literature. So the time requirement is we have to do some studies in our scenario, so that we can conclude, or we can say, we can add something on this. So this is all from my side.
Okay, thank you, Harpal. And I'm happy that you started doing some research work in this area. And most of the panelists, I think they all are having some COVID patient in their hospitals. So I think that study should be conducted as an ophthalmologist. And always I feel that the area of research is always there. So we should evaluate all the pattern of conjunctivitis, what type of conjunctivitis they are going to have, in how many cases the conjunctivitis will develop, and if our management permits us, that we should always go for COVID testing, even for conjunctival swab. And it will not only be informative for ocular purpose, but as ocular mode has been taught, and so let's find out that if it is not contributing to even respiratory aspect of COVID. So if our authorities permit, we should go for COVID testing of conjunctiva also. Dr. Madhu, I'd like to know from you that if this COVID conjunctivitis develop, in that case, what treatment you are going to prescribe?
Actually, what we have observed, it is like a kind of bilateral follicular conjunctivitis, and that is of mild type. So just giving a patient, keeping the patient on lubricating and antibiotic drops is sufficient, because it is self-remitting one. And we can continue with antibiotic and lubricating, and if needed, you can add low dose steroid comfortably, and you can treat them on this ground.
Okay, thank you, Madhu. Dr. Pankaj, will you like to come in that in your area you are getting some different pattern as far as this conjunctivitis is concerned?
Actually, Riva was in green zone since last 3 months. Now the cases are increasing up to 300. Now they are present. But up till now, we have not seen any case of conjunctivitis positive COVID. Though the seasonal conjunctivitis is coming, but positive not coming to our case. So to the Riva division, it is not a conjunctivitis as a presentation of the COVID. And we know that it is less than 1 to maximum 3%. So better option is the nasal swab. Ocular examination is important. We are also including that ocular examination to all the COVID patients, but we are not getting, and up till now we have not get any patient of the ophthalmic finding.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pankaj. Now, as I said that we are expecting other ocular manifestations also, that as I already said, because of presence of these ACE2 receptors in other areas. Now, Dr. Vivek, you are getting lots of retinal patients. I'd like to know from you that do you get uveitis in your COVID patients or any other retinal disorders if you have come across? So let us know. And apart from that, I would like to know from you about the use of immunosuppressives and steroids. Also brief us about the guidelines given by USI, Uveitic Society of India. And I'd like to know that whether we should continue with immunosuppressives and steroids if patient develops COVID or he turns out to be COVID positive, how you're going to manage these patients. Dr. Vivek.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Dr. Vasudha. This is actually, as far as our setup is concerned, we do have COVID patients, and it's a COVID center actually. But the whole concentration when it comes to COVID is, trying to identify those high-risk patients and, trying to prevent the mortality in those cases. And the whole psyche of the setup, doesn't look towards those minor ocular complaints. But as far as the literature is like I haven't examined specifically any ocular complaint from the COVID patients who are admitted in our hospital. We have not yet received any, severe complaints like the person has developed conjunctivitis or ocular complaints in the patients who have been admitted in our hospital. But from the literature, as far as the Chinese and the Western literature, they do mention that a few studies have been done, OCT-based studies have been done to evaluate the retinal changes in the cases of cases affected with COVID. And it was found that apart from a couple of reports, it was found that most of the time the patients do not develop any serious, effects of COVID in the retina, choroid, and uvea. Some reports done in the animals or mice and rabbits have shown that the coronavirus or the COVID persists in the retinal and the uveal tissue cells for a very long time, even after the viremia is over. So we know that they have a tendency to affect the retina. In the human OCT studies, they showed that some of these patients do develop some microvascular changes, because of which they develop small hemorrhages in the within the arcades in the papillomacular bundle, and also cotton wool spots in the nuclear layer. But there was no OCT angiographic changes as such, which pointed towards some significant anomaly that is occurring. So as far as humans are concerned, there are only two reports. One, which Madam has already mentioned in her presentation, that there was a case which developed by Dr. Emmanuel, which developed uveitis and retinitis. Apart from that, there is only one patient, one child, in which the child developed chilblains along with the signs of retinitis, vasculitis, and exudates in the vitreous cavity. And this child also recovered spontaneously. And these are the only two reports amongst all those lakhs and lakhs of patients who have been affected. I guess as the time passes and more patients come, there will be more reports which will be directing towards this. But there is no outbreak of retinitis or outbreak of uveitis which is associated with COVID. Yes, some stray cases, some isolated cases. So we can safely say that COVID is not going to majorly affect the retina and majorly affect. But we should be aware that if any patient has complaints of diminution of vision or floaters or any kind of symptoms which are occurring, in a COVID positive patient, we should take it seriously, as this might be having an effect on the retina, which we might not be aware of. And these should be actually documented and definitely put in public platforms, so that more and more people aware and become aware, and the ophthalmologist can treat such cases on time. So apart from this, the second question was about the uveitis. So as we know, there is only one single report from Dr. Emmanuel which says that the patient developed uveitis because of COVID. Apart from that, no widespread uveitis has been seen in COVID. And hence, there are two aspects now to uveitis. Uveitis in patients who do not have COVID. okay, and already on the treatment of uveitis or diagnosed as uveitis, and the patients who have developed COVID and have uveitis, which might be anterior or posterior. So the patients who do not have COVID and have uveitis are to be maintained. There's no change in protocol. They have to be maintained and treated as per the existing protocols without any variation. They can be given immunomodulators, they can be given steroids. No change in therapy has to be done, but we have to stress in these patients to maintain hygiene and to maintain distancing and to protect themselves as they are on drugs which might be reducing their immunity. But apart from that, they do not increase the risk of COVID per se. If they do not come in contact with a COVID patient or not exposed to COVID environment, then obviously they are not going to develop COVID. So the management of uveitis remains the same. The only variation would be there. The second variation which could be there is situations like we have now in Bhopal. You are again in lockdown. So the patients who are in the outreach areas might find it difficult to come to the hospital and show. So they might give consent to their doctor, and if their doctor is on telemedical platforms, then might take guidance, even though no new cases can be diagnosed without examination, and progression also needs to be examined. So with a caveat that you need to examine such patients in person. But if there is a dire situation, then you can obviously guide them regarding the treatment on telemedical approach. Now comes the question that the patient has COVID and has uveitis also on immunomodulator drugs and on steroids. So there is no such indication or there is no such guideline that says that you have to stop immunomodulators or steroids. So you can continue with them. But the most important thing in this is you have to consult with your intensivist or the person or the physician who is treating the COVID patient. If there is an indication, then the patient may be shifted to topical for anterior uveitis or for injectables, periocular and intraocular injectable steroids for patients in whom the intensivist says or the treating physician says that this corona patient, we do not want to give immunomodulators. So you shift to a modulation or modality of treatment where we do not have to give systemic therapy. This only if your intensivist says. If the intensivist says that there is no need to change, we can safely give steroids and immunomodulators because they also form a part of treatment of COVID, pneumonitis, and those crises that we have, cytokine crisis that we have in COVID. So the steroids definitely are indicated in certain situations in COVID. So your intensivist decides that this should be stopped, and if that has to be stopped, then we do have the option of shifting to periocular steroids and intraocular steroids. So this is as far as the management of COVID and uveitis is concerned. No change in guidelines for the normal non-affected patients, and we do not suggest PCR before immunosuppression. We don't need to do PCR for uveitis patients, RT-PCR for uveitis patients per se, until unless they have the standard, guidelines. They fall in the standard guidelines of contact with a COVID patient, or having done duties in the COVID ward or something like that. Otherwise, I don't think there is any indication of doing RT-PCR in uveitis. And even I like to mention in conjunctivitis also, you don't need to do an RT-PCR for all conjunctivitis patients. It is only if the indications for RT-PCR are very specific. You do not do it for general public. You are doing it for the patients who are coming from high-risk areas, from outstation, who have a history of exposure or who have been working in the COVID wards or other things. Otherwise, a person who has developed conjunctivitis or uveitis, you don't need to do an RT-PCR. You standard protocols.
You rightly said, Dr. Vivek, about RT-PCR, but this is just for purpose of research. We want to evaluate if it could give us some information, useful information, because conjunctival mode of transport is being taught, right?
Yeah, definitely. It can give you, it can give us important information from research point of view, but not in a country which is already not in the country, even in US, which is struggling to do the test,
Yeah.
Doing RT-PCR in every patient is not possible, not at all in conjunctivitis. When we are fighting.
Nobody will permit, and even we are not supposed to do, because there is already so much of overload from viewpoint of.
Obviously, we are not able to do investigations also.
This is just one aspect shared, because like we just wanted to discuss that how much conjunctiva or uveal tissue or aqueous humor can contribute in the transmission of this COVID, right? Otherwise, we all know that in our country, the situations
As
are
far as
very.
this, I'd like to come in here and I'll just like to highlight that as far as the studies done till now, they also have shown that, the highest incidence was shown only in one Chinese study where they had 1/3 of the patient, 12 out of 38 patients showed conjunctivitis. Apart from that, the conjunctivitis rate is even less than 1%.
Yes, sir. It's almost 0.8%.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
And one
And
more
see,
I'd like to share. Yes, madam.
if you do PCR and load is less, I think it will be negative. So they
yeah, it
just
is negative in
wasted.
most of the cases. It is
Yeah.
the yield is very low. I'm not saying that you should not do it for the research purposes, but when the story is that we already are short of it, we already find that, you can't do PCR test in the amount required for the general population. Obviously, you cannot share it on this for research purpose. We are already short.
Yes, yes, rightly said, Dr. Vivek. And ma'am, I will also like to share your opinion about involvement of retinal structure in COVID patients. Dr. Sharna, ma'am.
Actually, Vivek has told the right thing because
Yes.
there is no any manifestation comes across now. And
Yeah.
I have told before also that we are only 4 months old. So let us wait. Anything will come because this is a virus. So it can produce anything. It is a big hypercoagulability also. So retina may suffer. So we cannot ignore. We should continue examining the patient. And if any problem comes, then we will face.
Thank you, ma'am. Now we all know that in last couple of months we have changed at at the level of OT also and OPD also. So whenever patient comes to our OPD, starting from your registration counter, we start measuring the temperature, oxygen measurement is done. Then in maintaining the record system also we have made some changes. Then we are making use of face shields as well as we are making use of sweat lamp shields. But now, Dr. Farooq, I'd like to know from you that as far as examination of the patient is concerned in OPD, what changes or what innovations you have made? And our idea is like
Thank you, madam.
Yes,
talk
Dr.
less
Farooq.
to our patients, right? So mode of communication has also been changed.
Thank you.
So what changes you have made in your OPD? So and it will help in examination also. And but am I audible? Yes,
Yes,
Dr.
yes.
Farooq, you can go ahead with this.
You are audible now. Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am. Thank you for inviting me. As we know, it's testing time for us, doctors also, because it's a very tough time. Apart from the normal modifications like temperature check, hand sanitization, consent form, slit lamp barrier, most of the doctors must have done this modification in their clinic. So now, since the lockdown and since this period, we are mostly dependent on the online appointment system, and we are doing WhatsApp consultation if possible. And we are trying, we have only one exit and entry point for the patients. We keep the consultation room and other procedure room ventilated, and try social distancing norms. And we are not using the air conditioners as such. At the reception also, we are using minimum papers. We are keeping a fence at the reception so that the patient can talk to the receptionist from a distance. And only one receptionist is there who is generally doing all the entries of the patient. And we try to modify the duties. Alternate duties have been allotted to the staff so that minimum staff is there for working. And we use the minimum paper uses there. Online prescription has been preferred on these cases. If the patient is known, we can give the WhatsApp prescription also to the patient. And the patient should have Arogya Setu app installed in his phone, in his or her phone, so that we know that the patient is not from the contaminated area. Then we have removed all the reading materials like magazines and all the other extra furnitures from our waiting areas so that the patient doesn't transmit the virus through these things. And in the vision testing also, we do it in the ventilated area, ventilated open areas, and we use the disposable pinholes which we used to do in use in the PG times. And like if the patient is known to us and if he's known that he is suffering from diabetic retinopathy or something, we ask the patient to self-dilate and come to the clinic, and avoid touching the eye. Instead, we use the earbud, like in the indirect ophthalmoscopy also for indenters, we use the earbuds also. And we are using the autoclavable gowns. As such, PP is not possible all the time because in small clinics, small setup like us, we can't have can't use the PPE every day. So we are using the autoclavable gowns, and we do the donning and doffing at the separate area. And regular training of the staff is very important so that they can manage the patient properly. And all these precautions, which these precautions we are following at our clinic, because practically it is not possible for all the small clinics and hospitals to follow all the instructions that are given. So these are the minimum precautions which we are following at our setups.
Thank you, Farooq. And recently I came to know about certain innovations. Sometimes the things are not big. Only thing is they are accepted easily by some, while some don't follow it. So like pump system, foot operated pump system for sanitizers. We have then click sensor or indirect. And I think Farooq, people are making use of those PVC pipes also.
Yeah, PVC pipe.
Lances. So I think these are small little things. If possible, yes, Madhu, I would like to take your opinion also.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I just want to add on in Dr. Farooq's recommendations that we can prepare a questionnaire depending upon the symptoms, ocular symptoms. We can prepare a questionnaire, and while the patient is filling that declaration form regarding that COVID-19, we can give that questionnaire to the patient and ask the patient to tick according to his or her symptomatology. And that can be transferred to you either through a computer or through mobile WhatsApp. Your attendant can do that. So by the time the patient is reaching to you in your chamber, you are ready with the basic symptoms. You can directly ask 2 or 3 questions regarding the symptoms, and so that we can decrease the verbal communication between the patient and you.
And we are already doing it. We have a consent form. Like we already have that consent form, and we ask the patient about the contaminated areas, if they are living in some contaminated areas or having some symptoms, history of travel. We already have that form. Like we take the consent and we allow only one attender if possible, or only the patient can come. If the patient alone can come, then it is always good.
And everywhere it is not possible.
No, I'm talking about the symptoms. Actually, I'm talking about the symptoms. We get a questionnaire regarding.
Yeah.
And hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
At many places I have seen that people are making use of some Google Forms also for just to update this information, so that all the details before the patient enters, there must be at higher centers, but they are getting all those details before the patient comes to you. And apart from this, I like to add on that for simple dilatation of the patient, many times we already know that we have to do the fundus examination in advance. So we can ask the patient to get it dilated from home only. And apart from that, Dr. Vivek, I would like to know from you, Dr. Vivek, that how you go on with your retinal patients, because you have to do many invasive procedures. Sometimes you have to do imaging, perform imaging techniques also. So what is your protocol and how you proceed, particularly during this period of lockdown and even later on? Because fear of spread of COVID is all the time there. And but yes, we need to be safe also. So how you manage?
Yeah, I agree with Farooq regarding these protocols. Actually, these protocols have already been laid down by iOS in their guidelines. So we have that guidelines. So basically, I'll summarize it that you should space your patients, not allow the patients to come in and walk-in appointment should not be permitted. They should be given a number on which they should take prior appointments, and then space the patients. This helps reduce the crowding in the waiting areas and in the reception. Second thing is the waiting area reception has to have a triage area also, And the purpose of filling those forms is, by filling those forms, we segregate those patients who might be probably, infected or might have a chance or are high risk. So you segregate those patients and you do not examine. You send them first to the physician for, finalizing what if the patient has COVID or not. And those who are, whose temperature have been checked, are not from these high risk areas, are not positive on Arogya Setu, are then followed up as Dr. Farooq had said. You know, as far as retinal patients are concerned, what we have started doing is we do all these things. Apart from this, those patients who are in which whose pupillary reaction is to be noted, we do not ask them to be dilated prior to it. We first examine and then decide. Then the second thing is, while examining the retina patients, it's very difficult in the sense that, while doing indirect ophthalmoscopy, wearing those shields is not possible. And wearing those, big glasses is also not possible. But I wear specs, but you can also wear specs which are given, post-op specs, which are given to the patient, which are covered from all the sides. And from over that, you can do the indirect ophthalmoscopy. What we do is, as soon as the patient enters, we give the sanitizer to him and give gloves to him, disposable gloves. And we give him mask, which we ask him to stick to his nose, as we do while doing surgeries, as the surgeons usually do to prevent fogging. So what this does is, basically, even if the patient is talking and the aerosol is generated, that does not go out of his mask. So we provide a surgical mask and we stick. We provide sanitizer and gloves, and while examining, we wear N95 mask. We stick it on. We prevent the those areas which might be protruding from the skin and the air might be coming in. So we do that. We wear caps, surgical gloves, and then examine the case. Because we've all the standard protocols of examination are to be followed. Apart from this, you need to do 90-day examinations and OCTs and angiographies and other things. For all these things, standard guidelines are there, which have been given by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare as well as AIOS. All the attendants who are all the paramedics who are working are to be given PPE kits or personal protective equipments, which are commensurate with that kind of procedure if it is aerosol generating. There are shields and barriers for OCT and fluorescein angiography also. You can keep more distance rather than going more close to the patient. And third is, we clean all the equipments as per the guidelines in between uses. Say, for example, if you are doing a 90D, so after doing the 90D, you clean the rim with absolute alcohol. You clean the surfaces where the chin is kept and the the things, and the forehead is rested in OCT and angiography units. You clean all those areas with absolute alcohol. And the only thing is, you do not create crowd anywhere. Avoid talking. Minimize the talking, explain it beforehand, keeping the distance. You explain the procedure more thoroughly than before, that we used to do that intra procedure. We are going to do this. You are going to look at that target. We are going to change the direction of that target, or whatever you are going to do. It has to be, you have to spend more time per patient rather than, like before that, once the patient is sitting and suddenly this patient moves the eye, then you start shouting, no, don't do that. Look at that point, look at that point. You have to explain these things beforehand and not be very, vigorous in your procedures. If the patient moves, let him move. You might miss a few frames, doesn't matter, you do it again. But then don't get agitated or anxious like you used to before. So the COVID era is going to teach us to be more patient with ourselves and our patients. And keep in mind, apart from what Madhu and Farooq said, I'd like to add one more thing, that it is always advisable to keep a person who is monitoring all these things. Spare a person who is having all the personal protective equipment, and he monitors if any step is being, sometimes while doing some things, we forget, in our flow, we do some things which are against the recommendations, because we have not been trained and honed. Our reflexes are not like that. So what we do is, we ask one of the staff to just stand there and oversee what everybody else is doing and where the protocol is being broken, and try to correct it at that point of time, and then reinforce those things that you are supposed to do it like this, do that like that. So these are the only things that we have changed in retina cases.
So one more thing apart from this, particularly while examining glaucoma patients, as we talked about aerosol generation, we should be careful. Rather, we should prefer more of applanation tonometry rather than NCT and all, right? So
Avoid slit lamp examination in all the patients. So if it is not needed, the cases are of follow-up, there is no need, then don't do the slit lamp
Yes.
examination in all the cases.
yes,
And
as
in
long as it is
government,
possible.
yes. And in government setup, what we are doing is curtain should be removed. That is very important. It is like a dirty cloth of the kitchen. Same as that.
Yes,
So
curtains are
curtain
the
should
source
not
of
be there.
infection.
Nobody should touch that.
Correct.
Yes, it is very important to remove that. And stationery also. Don't move the stationery from the OPD like pen, dot. They should be there only. Don't put it in your pockets. And
Oh,
residents are using multiple papers, so the paper writing should be done by a one person. Otherwise, from OPD counter to you, it comes to the multiple hands. So it should be a one person writing on a paper rather than it is coming from one place to Vision to NCT to here. It should be avoided.
And there's one more thing I like to add is
yes, yes.
I like to add is apart from minimizing the handling of the paper, that in cases of retina, what we have started doing now is we have started, instead of doing multiple visits for intravitreal injections, now what we do is we ask the patient to be prepared for their next dose of injection, and in the same visit we do the OCT, evaluate, and if needed we inject. If not needed, then we send the patient back. So we do not do like that. We ask the patient to come for the examination and then we tell we'll give you injection on that date. So we ask the patient to come prepared. So we examine and give the injection at the same go. If not required, then we tell okay, you come after 4 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever is the schedule. So we have joined club together the investigation and injection on in a single visit rather than multiple visits.
Correct. So rightly said about
Just,
yes,
just
ma'am.
to reduce the,
Yes,
Vasudha,
ma'am.
just
Yes,
to
ma'am.
reduce the paper contamination, I think we can use the online devices also.
Correct,
Very
ma'am.
different.
Second thing, what about the questions are coming?
Pardon, ma'am.
Questions from the audience.
Yes, I have seen
Questions
there
from
is a
audience will be
question
getting
from.
it in the end, madam.
Acha, acha.
Audience
One
question.
more thing I want to add, ma'am.
Yeah.
When the patient comes to follow up,
Yeah.
we ask the patient to click the photo of the previous prescription and don't show again to the when you're coming for a follow up. And we give a next another prescription and dispose to the patient. Means patient should not come with the previous paper or previous report. All the reports should be clicked in a mobile or and they sent to us. So before coming to this is one of the way to don't you see the previous prescription.
Thank you, Harpal. Now we talked about OPD patients and how innovations we have made, and obviously it will help us in fighting the COVID. Now coming to the OT, what is happening these days that we are supposed to wear those PPE kits and N95 masks. Then we are talking about negative pressure ventilation in air conditioners. So things are very difficult because it is not just for the sake of comfort or discomfort. It is because lots of fogging we are coming across. So it is many times very troublesome. And then we are talking a lot about aerosolization also, right? So they say that while doing phaco or even anterior vitrectomy, so what are aerosols basically? They are, I mean, it's a combination of tears, fluid coming from irrigating port and then high speed vibrating probe of the phaco inside. The three things contribute to generation of aerosols. So my question to all of you is that does size of incision or sleeve makes any difference as far as aerosol particles are concerned, particularly in phacocycly? Secondly, they are mentioned that aerosols are generated even during YAG laser capsulotomy. So how can we justify and how can we explain that generation of aerosols on the surface of cornea? And then what measures you are going to correct these to take care of these aerosol particles? So Dr. Madhu, I'd like to take your opinion about this.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on that. Currently, madam, it is unknown whether the viable SARS-CoV-2 particle can be aerosolized in sufficient quantities to form an effective inoculum for the transmission to the healthcare provider. But to deal with this is an uncertain thing. To deal with this uncertainty, what we can do at our level is before starting the surgery. That is, if I'm practically I'm talking about the phacoemulsification at present. Before starting the surgery, what we can do, we can put the 5% povidone iodine and wait for 15 seconds after that before starting the surgery. The next thing which is recommended is the incision size. It is said that less the incision size, the smaller is the incision size, the less is the aerosol generation. So putting a 2.2 millimeter incision decreases the wound leakage, and that's why it decreases the aerosol production. Coming to by putting another thing, what we can do is we can put HPMC over the incision site. That HPMC actually prevents the aerosol generation at the incision site, and also the dispersion of the aerosol which is being generated. Its high molecular weight and plasticity may also act as a damper to the ultrasonic energy, preventing the agitation and consequent aerosolization. These are the steps which we can take care while performing a phacoemulsification to prevent and minimize the aerosol which is being generated at that particular time. If we talk about the next question is regarding the cautery. Yes, madam, cautery produces aerosol. It causes aerosol generation. So it is recommended that before going for a cautery, what we can do is, again, as it is recommended that povidone iodine has a varicidal effect. So we can put the povidone iodine before going for cautery to minimize the aerosolization. That means to decrease the virus load practically. The third thing is YAG laser. Yes, ma'am. Laser, it acts on the principle of photo disruption. But it is said that it produces aerosol that contains the debris and the vapor. But that is particularly in the surrounding area of the target tissue. That means if we are performing an iridotomy, it is in that area. And if we are performing capsulotomy, it is particularly in that area. But even it is always better to take preventive measures. And for that, what we can do, we can put povidone iodine as recommended, 5% povidone iodine before performing the YAG laser. And we can use, always try to use the lens, the iridotomy or the capsulotomy lens, and use HPMC as a coupling agent, so that if any kind of aerosolization is there at the tear film, that can be prevented. And another thing, what I was supposed to answer was regarding the intubation and extubation of the patients which are undergoing GA surgery. In that case, it is advisable to minimize the staff in the operation theater. It is better to get intubation at that when intubation is being performed. Only the anesthetist and the technician should be there. After intubation is being done, it is advisable for the surgeon and the staff to enter in the operation theater at least after 15 minutes. And they need to come out after performing the surgery. Before extubation, they have to come out. So because we all know that it is an aerosol generating procedure, and particularly this is being done in that area where the viral load is maximum. Another thing what we can do is, before taking the patient for surgery, we can advise the patient to do 1.25% use 1.25% betadine goggles, so that this will decrease the viral load which is present in that particular area.
So I agree with you, Dr. Madhu. One thing is that nowadays we are talking about aerosol generation. So aerosols were generated earlier also, but
Yes,
it is
ma'am.
just because of the fear of presence of this virus in tears or conjunctival sac, right? Now, second thing I would like to add here, that as you said that in intubation or other procedures, even for that matter, syringing and probing has to be avoided, they say. So because we are expecting a greater viral load in that area, right? So, and
Yes, what happened?
sedative for surgery, obviously we should take due care, and we should make use of povidone iodine, because it is said that it is very effective in combating that. So obviously we should take that care. And apart from that, I think we are coming across. fear of facial area, I think that is also important. The ugly laser capsulotomy, because I think that it is in a generation is there in a closed chamber. So does it going to harm the patients or persons in surrounding of the patient? Dr. Ma'am Gupta?
No, no, no. I think if it is in the closed chamber, then it is not going to harm. Until unless there is some, it is too much, then it may produce the iritis or iritis. That is reactionary in the patient.
So we
Otherwise,
just want to know these aerosols are generated inside or on the ocular surface. In
no,
cases
it
of
is inside, inside,
it is inside.
inside only.
Okay. So thank you so much, ma'am. And one thing I forget to mention, that is about negative pressure ventilation in air conditioners. So what is your opinion, Harpal and Madhu? I will also like to know from you that how can we manage, because it is said that positive pressure ventilation, instead of positive pressure, we are supposed to maintain it in the negative direction. So it is not practically possible to work without ACs or to change over to that system. So some engineering changes can always be done, modifications can always be done, but I'd like to know from you, Dr. Madhu.
Ma'am, regarding negative pressure ventilation, it is advisable in the area where COVID positive patients are there. That means in the ICU or ward, where you have to decrease the viral load present in the environment. Regarding the operation theaters, what we can just rushing after negative pressure ventilation is not advisable. What we can do, if we have a HEPA filter in our OT, we can increase the air exchange per hour, which is routinely it's 10 to 14. We can make it to 25 to 30 air exchange per hour. Another thing what we can do, what we are supposed to do is to maintain the humidity between 40 to 60% and the temperature from 24 to 30 degrees. That's what we can do in our operation theater. Another thing what is advisable is to use the UVC lamps or the lights that can be added on. That is advised to, that has a germicidal effect and decreases the viral load in that particular area. That can be used.
Okay. Even about UV chambers, people are talking about, like, for sterilization of mask and all that. They keep it for 3 hours in that chamber for mask sterilization. So,
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Harpal, will you like to comment on this? Dr. Harpal?
Yeah, ma'am. Beside this, we should take a minimum OT in a day. We should minimize the number of patients.
Correct.
Apart from this, we should use all disposable as far as possible. OT, table cover and table sheets, all should be a disposable. Along with, we can have a air purifier also. That can help, especially in the patient side, so that it will clean the whatever patient head side. So these are the can be added in our OT setup.
Okay. Thank you, Harpal. Now, one thing, actually, as far as communication part is there, now it is lacking at many points, because nowadays, every time it is said that we should talk less, right? Now, a few months back, if you might have come across, they were saying that one of the surgeon was charged fine because of WhatsApp communication, WhatsApp consultation rather. So I want to know from you all that what is exactly telemedicine and what is the difference between telemedicine and telecommunication. What we are doing these days, even our Honorable Prime Minister said that for small ailments you can consult telephonically. So this is what we people are doing nowadays. We are sharing photographs of conjunctivitis through WhatsApp. So I would like to know that what is exactly telemedicine is, and what we do routinely. I don't think that it comes under telemedicine, simply sending photographs of conjunctivitis on WhatsApp. And are there some fixed guidelines, because there is some change in the rules and some guidelines have been set from 25th March onwards, 2 months back only. So are there fixed guidelines for this telemedicine and telecommunication? And are there some laws or medical legal aspect?
Yes. Yes. All of us. Yes. All of us are doing this.
Dr. Pankaj, I would like to know from you.
Yes. Thank you very much. All of us have.
Dr. Pankaj?
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Basuda.
Am I audible?
Yes. Yes. Very much audible.
Pankaj, you are not audible. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, in the month of late March and April, all of us have done lot of telecommunication with our patients, and we have given advices, prescription, everything. But that is not a telemedicine. When somebody is giving you a phone call and you are answering it and giving it a prescription, is not a telemedicine. So according to the WHO, what is telemedicine? It is a delivery of the healthcare services where the distance is a critical factor for the healthcare professional, using the information and communication technologies for the exchange of information of diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of the disease, research, and education. For education of the healthcare provider, all these advising the health of the individual and their community. So who is eligible for this telecommunication? All the registered ophthalmologists under the MCI. Who is excluded from this? You cannot give this telecommunication telemedicine to the outside India. Type technology, whatever you are using. So what are the mode? Either you can use video, audio, or by the text. Timing, it may be synchronous or asynchronous. Synchronous means you are doing it in the real time, either by the video conferencing or on WhatsApp. Asynchronous, when you are getting information from the patient and taking all the information like images and everything, and giving the prescription later on by analyzing the diagnosis. So the purpose will maybe a first visit, a patient coming to you for the first time, or a follow-up. What is follow-up? When he is coming for the same problem after 6 months. So if the person is under your treatment, but if he is coming with some new symptom, then it is a first visit. So what is telemedicine? It is an interaction between either ophthalmologist to the patient, or a caregiver to the ophthalmologist, or healthcare worker to the ophthalmologist, or ophthalmologist to a specialist ophthalmologist talking to retinal or uveal ophthalmologist, or you are giving any emergency treatment. So there are some guidelines made on March 2020. First is the contest. You decide whether the telemedicine is an required one or a patient can come to you. First, if it is possible, do it physical presence. If it is not possible, then only do this telecommunication. Second, it should not be anonymous. You must know who is talking to you. You should have the identity of that patient, and if he's minor, then you should have one adult person with him to give the consent, and you should give your identity also by giving your registered medical practitioner number. Mode of communication may be video, audio, or text. Then the consent should be there. If patient is initiating this conversation, then it should be an implied consent. But if the doctor is initiating from our side, then it should be an explicit consent should be there. Type of consent may be depend. Always maintain all the records. To maintain all these records, now there are multiple apps are available, like bigger hospitals, they were doing it routinely previously also. Now it is a time everybody should get opt for this, because this COVID is going to live with us whole of the 20, maybe in the 21 also. So telemedicine is going to be a part of your practice in next few months and maybe for a year. So keep that records, all the things. And most important, if we are doing this, we are doing practice in this way, what about the financial support? By this, you can do to take the fees, and that fees receipt should be given to the patient and maintain all the records, and records should be kept for 3 years if you are doing the telemedicine. And drugs to be prescribed are divided into O, A, B, and P. O is the over-counter drug, can be prescribed like ORS, paracetamol can be given to anybody. A are the safer drug to be given on the first visit only. B are follow-up visit, you can prescribe the safer drugs. And P is the prohibited drug, should not be given at all. So the prescription, how you are going to prescription, it is not like SMS, you are giving a SMS or WhatsApp a message. It should be a printed with your digital sign, should be a prescription with your registered medical number of the MCI. Then only it is going to be a valid prescription by telemedicine. So keep all these records, and you can do this telemedicine. And it is very important in this period for the patient also and for the doctor also. Previously, a comprehensive doctor is sending the patient to the retinal and taking their opinion. Now it is not possible. So it is the easiest way. You are taking the images and sending it to your colleague, retinal ophthalmologist, and taking their advice. So telemedicine is going to be the way of the practice in future.
One thing I would like to add on, I recently gone through an article published by one of the higher center, and it was almost data of more than 6,000 patients. So what they do that, like when patient calls, first when the patient makes first call, they take the consent also. And if suppose patient asks questions like this, that corona kab jayega or something like that, so then that question is dealt by their telecounselor at an initial level. And if they ask something like that, what treatment I'm supposed to continue, even for dates of surgery, that counselor part takes care very well. And if it is something related to the subject, so like what treatment to be continued on or some problems related to surgery, then they refer the questions to their ophthalmologist. So this is how they are managing. So thank you, Pankaj. And now,
And
Dr.
to add on something, Dr. Vasudha,
Yeah.
there is a misconduct in telemedicine also. Misconduct means whatever data you are getting or the photographs, you cannot share it without the consent of the patient.
Correct.
Same as what we are doing. So it is misconduct is very important, because negligence in telemedicine is also legally punishable. So it is
Correct.
important to take care of that.
What we,
And now telemedicine insurance is also available. Like
Okay.
normal professional insurance, telemedicine insurances are also available now.
Correct. You rightly said, Dr. Pankaj, but what these days we are doing, particularly during this phase of lockdown, we came across many consultations either for conjunctivitis or anything else, and we are answering this through WhatsApp. So is it allowed or not? Right? Because they have
It
made
is
some
that is not telemedicine, because you are not charging anything. But
No,
that
no,
is
they're
not
not
our
charging.
that is not the way of telemedicine. If you are prescribing, it is not allowed. Ideally, you should do on a digitally signed prescribed your prescription with your RMP number and having the identification of the patient talking to you. So that is not telemedicine talking on a WhatsApp.
Rightly said.
One more thing, madam. One more thing, madam. Telemedicine system should be taken from authorized providers. Nowadays,
Yes,
because of this time, there are so many illegal, unauthorized sort of providers also there. So you have to be very careful before consulting telemedicine system.
Correct.
Actually, he should be a registered medical practitioner from a registered organization.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but my simple question to all of you is that even still we are doing this, like patients are sending you the pictures for on WhatsApp for consultation. Sometimes they're sending it by mail also. Maybe we are not charging. So are we supposed to do like this, or we should stop doing this? This is what I'm asking, because this has become very common during lockdown.
This is not legal.
This is not legal. Right.
No.
Actually,
yes.
I'll like to come in here. There are guidelines which are there available on the net also. It is on the one of the guidelines is from NCI and Board of Directors. At this point of time, it's a huge set of guidelines. All these questions are the one guideline is from the NCI and the other guideline is from Health and Family Welfare. So there are specific guidelines. All the methods from the text message to WhatsApp to everything has been now included in telemedicine. And there are multiple aspects, like you have to take consent. Then that also has been defined. And there are aspects to it, like if the patient is approaching you, it is an implied consent, and then you can take a formal consent also. So there are different types of consents. Implied consent is also having a legal importance. Then you have certain
Explicit consent.
Yeah, there are certain ways of prescribing which has to be which were previously followed and have been laid down by the NCI. Those prescription guidelines have to be followed even in telemedicine.
Yes.
They cannot be overlooked. Okay. And the third aspect, which is very important, which Dr. Pankaj also mentioned, that there are aspects of privacy and regarding the patient's data and the images and everything. So those privacy aspects have to be kept. One thing has to be kept in mind, that we are not supposed to share it, but if that data has been leaked because of certain or mismanaged because of certain technological aspects, then that liability does not come on the doctor. If somebody hacks your thing or a site and takes it, or there is some kind of a thing like that which can be proved, if it is because of the technical aspect that the confidentiality has been breached, then it is not the responsibility of the doctor in telemedical work. Then it becomes the responsibility of the service provider or the platform that you are using. So there are multiple guidelines and multiple questions which arise in this, and it's a very huge topic, but I'll definitely recommend you to go through the guidelines provided. And one more thing, till now there is no legal like foundation that you have to do a course or there's some kind of a course, but the Board of Governors is definitely developing a course for it. And once that course is notified on the online, then everybody who wants to do a telemedical consultation will have to attend this course, take a certificate. Yeah, before you start doing the practice or telemedical practice. Abhi ye guideline nahi aayi hai, so it is not a mandatory thing. Once it is informed and notified, then we'll all have to take a course and then we'll be eligible to do telemedical practice. Till then, we can do whatever we want if it is done as per the MCI guidelines.
Okay, ma'am. Now, before we get into this question answer session, I'll request Dr. Swarna Bisaria, ma'am, to sum up the things, and I will get back to you as soon as I get these questions on this box. So, ma'am, please sum up the things. Yeah.
I will like to congratulate Dr. Vasudha Damle for her excellent moderation and coordination. I am thankful to her for her efforts. I am thankful to her for her efforts in preparing all these scripts and everything. Now it is well said by the Vasudha, this is the time to turn crisis into an opportunity. So we should, after knowing the facts, I think nobody will fear, and we'll know where is the lacuna, we are going to deal it strongly. In this discussion, we can conclude this virus is only, up till now, virus is only in the tears, and that is producing a very low incidence of conjunctivitis in our country. So till now, we are safe. But on the contrary, you will see the eye is very nearer to us, to the nose. So infection may spread to you during examination procedures or the surgeries or to the patient. So one should be careful about the decontamination of the equipments, decontamination of the things we are using, and the proper spacing. And then Dr. Farooq has explained this very nicely, that how we can take care in the OPD, OT, and everywhere. Regarding the aerosolization, this Madhu has explained very nicely. Because the load is not much, again, there is no any problem. But even then, prevention is better than the cure. So pyridine iodine is used, and the contact lens is used in case of the laser. Now, in other countries, the manifestations, Vivek has told, and I have also told, but India, we are fortunate, we have only mild conjunctivitis, which needs only the conventional treatment. And we doesn't need to do the RT-PCR or anything. But only thing is that when we are doing surgeries, during surgeries under GA, intubation and extubation should be done properly. The time should be changed. Otherwise, there will be, because the virus is mostly present in the nasal cavity, nasopharyngeal cavity. So infection may be 100% if we will be in close contact. So where are we should take care at the places where we can catch the infection, and we can provide the services to the patients with safety, under safety, and look for this stranger, whether how it takes the turns and how much it becomes the virulent. Because we don't know after coming the vaccination, whether the vaccine will be worked on this strain or not. Daily it is changing the strain. But there is no need of fear. We will have to provide our services to the patients. Thank you.
Thank you so
By
much.
the
ma'am.
time
Time was, yes.
Dr. Vasudha come prepared with the questionnaire, I'm trying to answer Dr. Prabal Bhargav's question. He's asking, how has undergraduate teaching transformed during the lockdown? Any innovations to maintain the continuity in the curriculum of the delivery? It is asked by Dr. Prabal Bhargav. He's from Malaysia. Dr.
Yeah.
Prabal, what
Thank you.
we have started with is we have started their online classes right from the mid of the April, and we are doing it on a team Microsoft. It is a very good app. There are so many apps are available, but importance and advantage of team Microsoft is you can maintain the calendar, you can upload all your lectures, and you can maintain the attendance. So there is no need to keep anything else, because in some of the apps what you are doing is only live. There is no records, but here you can record everything. So everything is maintained, and we have started, and it is moving very smoothly. In between, we have taken the online exam of the MS practical exam also, and the same way we have taken the sessionals also, 2 sessionals online. So everything is possible now. Students are also apt to that, and it is moving very smoothly.
Ankit, I'd like to add here, I think we are getting more number of students online also, because
Yes.
they need not to rush for morning class. So at times they are
Yes,
rather more comfortable.
but
And secondly, as you said about exams, I think
but
guidelines for each
yes,
exam are there.
but
But
we
for
have to
each
be a
exam, we are
little
still
bit
getting.
we have to
For
be
each
vigilant, because
exam.
sometimes they are opening it and moving here and there. So you have to
Yeah,
be interactive in between, ask somebody to get answer.
yeah, correct. So
And
thank you, Dr. Pankaj. Now coming back to question answer session, there is a question by Dr. Vimlesh Oja. Dr. Vimlesh Oja, he has asked, generally we see nowadays that after treatment, all the resident and consultants become positive. My question is, does any screening procedure should be used before any surgical intervention, which can protect us and feasible to do all ophthalmic patient, which is taken person?
Ma'am, I
of
would like
course,
to answer this.
Yes, yes, go on.
Actually, RT-PCR before cataract or any kind of intraocular surgery is not mandatory. According to the guidelines which are given by this All India Ophthalmological Society, it is not mandatory. What we can do is we can take adequate precautions to prevent the aerosol and droplet transmission. So we can ask the patient, as I already mentioned, we can ask the patient to do a 1.25% betadine gargle before entering into the OT, put a disposable gown or a linen gown, put that shoe covers, and give the patient 3-ply mask. And very well said by Dr. Vivek Som, we can put a micropore over that, so that it prevents further droplet transmission. And for the surgeon, you can put on a linen gown and a impermeable disposable gown over it to protect yourself. You can use an N95 mask. Space the surgeries, don't rush up, do this, put a gap of approximately 15 minutes. And while performing surgery, all the precautions which we have advised while performing phacoemulsification we can do. And while putting that disposable drape, one thing I want to mention here, that disposable adhesive drapes are available with us. While putting that, we have commonly seen that the sticking over the nasal bridge and over that lower lid area is not that good. So you have to check it, because this is the area from where you can expect the droplet to come out and come out of in that operating area. So you can put a proper adhesive tapes here, so that less of the droplet transmission is there. And what you can do, you can switch off the AC when the patient is entering into the OT and when the patient is moving out. And in between, when the patient is properly draped, you can switch on the AC. Another thing what I want to add on is to, while performing the surgery, change the phaco tip and sleeve after every case. And to prevent the transmission of infection from one patient to another, you can change the tip and sleeve.
So
One
I think,
thing more.
Dr. Madhu, yes, ma'am.
One thing more, I think we should take the general history of the patient about the general symptoms from the place he is coming. Is it a continental place or not, contamination was there. Or second thing, the communication should be very, very less. Person should be less in the OT.
But Dr. Madhu, I'd like to know here that recently there were some guidelines released in which they included even elective surgeries for RT-PCR. This is true that this is not being done. Again, the point of overload is already there. Our
Yes,
system is
ma'am.
already overloaded. But then among some guidelines, it was published that these elective surgeries should also be included. What is your opinion, Vivek, about this?
Ma'am, the elective surgeries which are we expect that we have to perform in under GA. In that cases, it is recommended that you go ahead with RT-PCR. But just for cataract surgery, going for RT-PCR is going to increase the load of over the investigation part.
Correct. So there is another question from.
Question.
Yes.
There is a question from Dr. Sujata Laktakia that should we take a written or informed consent from the patient before examining? Yes, it is very important.
Yes, of
And
course.
AIOS is given a written consent template also. So
Yes.
whether you are working in a government or in a private setup, it is a must from the patient to get it signed for all the willingness for consent of any examination if we get COVID positive. After that, then consent is a must for all the patients.
So rightly said Pankaj, and I think the same question was being asked by Mr. KC, Dr. KC Rathore also, related to consent of the COVID. So we all know that it is things happen sometimes that rather patients also want to know that if they acquire the infection from hospital, then what is going to happen. So it could be both ways, right? Risk is always there. So another question is by Mr. Ved Prakash Kaushal. How much dose we are supposed to take of vitamin C and vitamin D in case of COVID?
I will answer for this. Vitamin C is 500 milligram and
Okay.
vitamin D is from 400 to 800 because
Okay.
overdose of vitamin D is dangerous. It
Okay.
produces even the bone loss.
Okay. Mr. Hitesh Netravali, they have asked, any comment on Avastin in COVID patients? Yes, Vivek, you have to answer this.
Fasting.
And COVID patients, why would we like to inject Avastin? I don't know. But that was on a lighter note.
No,
but
he's
Avastin is a drug which is an off-label drug, and it is being used worldwide. And in the indications where Avastin is to be used, there is no contraindication of using Avastin or ranibizumab or any other intravitreal. If you can do cataract surgery and vitrectomy surgeries, then obviously you can give Avastins. There is no issue.
There is a question
In COVID positive patients, sir, we can defer it till the patient is like being treated, and we can do it later on because it's not
COVID
necessary.
positive patient,
After 2 weeks.
Just one. I'll just like to clarify. There are a few things I think you should mention. We should have discussed in the OT protocols. The first thing is you have to do in the time of pandemic, and when your area is an endemic area where the COVID is rising, you are not supposed to do elective surgeries.
Exactly.
You are going to do only emergency surgeries. Second, emergency elective surgeries. Those elective surgeries which have become emergent, like a mature cataract now may land up with, or an intumescent cataract which appears that it can land up with phacomorphic glaucoma, you can do it. But if there is a person who has 612, 6/9 vision and his life is not disabled, he is not disabled, definitely it has to be deferred, because even if you do an RT-PCR, it might come negative, because all the RT-PCRs do not come, even in COVID patients all the time, it is not going to come positive. There are times when you can get false negative. So that is why only the emergent elective surgeries and the emergency surgeries are supposed to be taken with all due precautions. And the due precaution should be such that you assume that all the patients are COVID positive. When a patient is COVID positive, diagnosed patient, then the same rules are going to apply again. If it is an emergency, you inject. If it is not an emergency, you do not inject. But a COVID patient is going to be managed for COVID first. once you save his life and he is tested negative after his COVID treatment, then you can definitely take a treatment, because COVID is anyhow going to be treated for 10 to 15 days, and there is never an emergency of intravitreal anti-VEGFs for 10 to 15 days. If you do not inject in 15 days, the person is going to lose the eye permanently.
So rightly said, Dr. Vivek. Now coming back to another question by Dr. R.K. Gupta. He has asked, what about chances of CRA and CRV occlusion in COVID? Dr. Vivek.
Yeah, definitely. It's a microembolic phenomenon. There is embolism, there is thrombosis. It is a thing which has been documented, and it is one of the major causes. Disseminate DIC is one of the most important causes of deaths. Those along with those cytokine storm. So definitely it can cause, but till now there are no mass reports like in 3% or 2% incidence of CRAO or vascular occlusions in COVID. So we'll have to wait and see. How the reports come from all over the world. They would be coming, I think, with time. More and more reports are going to come. But then if there is a patient who complains of diminution of vision, definitely we should examine. And if there is a CRAO, it's an emergency. It should be managed immediately, even if the patient is COVID positive.
Okay, thank you.
Because of the hypercoagulability.
Yes.
We should take care of it.
Yes.
Another question is by Xavier Singh Bindra. Is COVID test advised in cases of conjunctivitis without any systemic manifestation?
It has already been given.
Yeah. So I think that again the wrong
for the benefit of Xavier, since he has asked, and Xavier will like to reiterate, we have already discussed it, and I'd like to tell you once again that the chances of patient with COVID developing conjunctivitis is very less. And the highest that was reported was around 12 in 38 patients in China. The second thing is, even if the patient is COVID positive and has the chances of his viral load being very high in conjunctivitis
is due to many causes. So we can't do all the conjunctivitis.
You cannot do RT-PCR in all the patients. It is not viable and it is not possible in this situation in our country. But if you have a patient who has a history of contact, who has a history of exposure to patients, you can definitely go ahead. You can definitely go ahead and do the RT-PCR. But for conjunctivitis, doing RT-PCR, I think, is not indicated.
Yes. Vasudha, last question is from Seema.
Yeah, I'm reading it, ma'am. 1 minute.
By the time Dr. Rashmi has asked about the refraction, what are the precautions to be taken in refraction? So refraction, you should take all the precaution of distancing one patient at a time and clean all the lenses after every patient's refraction. So that is
one more question is there, that what should be preoperative investigation for SICs regarding COVID-19 protocol? Investigation. Yes, Madhu.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, there are no specific pre-operative investigations required for a small incision, because in small incision, you are, if you avoid using cautery, in that case, the chances of aerosol are minimum. So there are no specific pre-operative investigation needed for SICs. That routine one which we are following, that is sufficient enough.
Okay.
Dr. Seema is asked for,
pardon,
is there drop or medicine to protect our eyes to get infected? Dr. Seema is asked for.
Yeah.
So it is not available at all, but the only thing is, to all the patient, by rule, you put a povidone iodine drop,
yes,
so that will prevent a bit of.
Even in lesser percentage, it is effective, said to be effective.
Yes.
So one more question by Harshida Navre. Yeah, she is one of the undergraduate. She has asked, ma'am, if patient doesn't have any smartphone device or electronic device, because majority of patients are from poor background, that how should we maintain the minimum paperwork? I think mobile everyone is having, but still, as she has asked, so if they don't have any electronic device, then how to minimize the paperwork?
Every
think
time, at least
everybody-
we can use a new paper and give them prescription. That's what we can do. It's every time give them a new prescription.
Correct. And many times what we do that sometimes we keep papers with ourselves, we write it and give it to them. We don't
Yes.
do much exchange of the papers. This is what we can do.
Yeah, no, this is practice we are following in our hospital. We are prescribing the patient prescription and keep that prescription with us, and we use treatment in a small slip to the patient.
Correct.
So
Yeah,
that
that's what I suggested. Right. Dr. Shahil has asked, ma'am, that what will happen if virus reaches to blood instead of respiratory tract while surgery? Is it same like other viral infections?
Is reaching to blood.
Yeah, she might be. She might want thought of knowing about hematogenous mode of transport. Maybe she wants to know about that.
I don't think the patient will be alive then. If it will reach to this, he will have, patient will have septicemia and the polysystemic problems. So it will not be able to, ophthalmic problem will not be there. Only the general medicine persons will be able to tackle it.
Okay.
And I don't think there's hematogenous spread just now.
Correct. Dr. Bimlesh Oja has asked another question. In AIOS guidelines given, at least X-ray chest should be done before treatment. Is it useful or not?
That is useful only in the symptomatic patient. Asymptomatic patient chest X-ray is not going to give you any positive finding.
I think, sir, it should be incorporated in our routine. Whatever cases we are operating now, it's better to do X-ray chest because there is a manifestation of COVID. Sometimes it comes into the X-ray. We can make us safeguard for us. This is a recommendation nowadays to do X-ray chest before doing cataract surgery.
X-ray test is done initially.
Yes,
Saturation is more important rather than doing it.
Yes.
Before doing that, we should check the oxygen saturation of the patient.
So now we are not left with any questions. Anything else we want to discuss? And I hope everything is clear now.
So thank you very much.
Okay. Ma'am, I would like to give first of all thanks to all the audience. And I would like to thank even Ajanta people for and all the executives from Ajanta people for arranging this wonderful session. And I'd like to thank you, ma'am, because you have shown your trust in all of us and bringing us all together on this platform. So thank you so much, ma'am. And obviously you were there, so we could thought of this wonderful session like this. I'd like to thank all the panelists, Dr. Pankaj, Dr. Vivek, Dr. Farooq, Dr. Harpal, Dr. Madhu. And I'm really thankful to you because you spared lots of time and it was really nice interacting with you all. So thank you so much. And anybody would like
Pleasant to see you all.
Yeah.
Along with the Ajanta people. They have worked a lot and they have devoted so much time to us. Thank you.
So we all hope to see many such more interactions. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you.